This episode of Bob Sponge is more disturbing and deep than you remember. The episode begins with Bob and Patricio satisfied after a day of fun in the glove world. A cheerful, colorful, and comfortable place where Bob and Patricio feel safe and comfortable. Confident, they get on the bus, thinking that it is the usual route that will take them home. After exchanging some laughs, Patricio calmly asks Bob, "Where are you going out in the background of Bikini?" Alarmed, Bob realizes that he has taken the wrong route and in a totally exaggerated way begins to get armed and scream that they have taken the bus wrong. Out of nowhere, the driver accelerates to get into the unknown place. In an useless attempt by Bob to control the situation, he tries to approach the driver to clarify what is happening. However, this seems useless, since the sudden change sends him back to the back of the bus. As a curious fact, the episode only lasts 5 minutes. I think I'm not the only one who was surprised to discover this, since at the time of watching this episode as a child, I could have sworn that this lasted a whole year. Likewise, this episode can not only represent the disturbing fear that we felt as children towards the darkness, but it is also a brilliant analogy about how some people experience depression, which we will analyze and address at the end of the video. Continuing with the chapter, Bob and Patricio are stranded in the apparent nothingness, surrounded only by darkness and uncertainty, to which Patricio naturally asks, "Where are we?" To which Bob rudely answers, "We are in the abyss." This is a place that is quite contrasting with the reality that he experienced a few moments ago, a place that transmits fear, insecurity, and a constant sense of alertness against the apparent dangers that the darkness of the abyss may have. The first impressions are that it is a completely different, strange place, so much so that something like the simple task of identifying which bathroom you need to go to is not even so clear. His first impression when interacting with this place only achieves to alarm them more due to the characteristics of the inhabitants of the abyss. A reference more than within the darkness, and therefore to the fact that the place is not the place we want to go to. In the dark, we can only find monsters with bad intentions and dangers, a completely wrong perception of Bob that will be denied later. It is here where we can finally see Patricio panic. When leaving his comfort zone, Patricio is alarmed. He does not understand the language, not even the physiognomy of the inhabitants of this part of the sea. Surrounded by uncertainty and darkness, his first reaction is to want to go home. But were they actually in a dangerous situation? Or was only uncertainty not letting them see them beyond their fear? What would have happened if they had simply kept calm and waited patiently for the next bus? In an attempt to regain control of the situation, Bob calms Patricio with a nervous but serene attitude. He asks Patricio to wait patiently in that place, and in case he gets to the bus, heading to Bikini's background, he warns him, in which he, meanwhile, will go to look for the schedules for the next buses, heading to Bikini's background. Bob, nervous but determined, heads towards the bus station and without warning hears Patricio's voice, which indicates that the bus arrived, and, fortunately, 5 seconds ago, exactly at the moment he left. In a desperate attempt by Bob, he runs after the bus, dividing it further and further away from him. Bob, trying to climb the steep hill, tries to fly to return to his safe place, but in the end, this was in vain. Sad, defeated, disappointed, and now alone, Bob returns to the bus stop. But this time, something is different. He is totally alone. Alone in an unknown, dark, and disturbing place. Bob's expression is already different, without Patricio close by. He no longer has to pretend not to be afraid, worried about the hour and that it's almost time to feed Gary. He realizes that he has his cords free, a serious mistake since this carelessness, again, will cost him being abandoned by the bus. Resigned, Bob patiently waits for the return of the bus, but after a gust of wind, his balloon flies away. Bob runs after him to repair it desperately. But why is that balloon so important? Why doesn't he just let it go and that's it? Well, from my point of view, the balloon represents his last link. It represents the safety and comfort, and losing the balloon means losing that little security that the balloon can transmit to him, which would mean being completely alone. But in the search to cling to recover his balloon and that small but not insignificant souvenir of his home, he loses the opportunity to return home again. Angry, he throws his hat to the ground, without realizing the presence of one of the inhabitants of the abyss. Without a balloon, without a hat, and without the possibility of returning home, he decides to do what he should have done from the beginning, which was to ask for help. Bob finally asks for help. However, the inhabitant of the abyss seems to make fun of him and go after the balloon he just lost. Bob, trying to clarify the situation, loses the bus again and the possibility of returning home. It is strange how Bob still trusts what first led him to get into that problem. How is it that despite being abandoned on several occasions by the bus, Bob continues to maintain his hopes on the bus that seems to never arrive? And that when it arrives, it seems that he rejects it over and over again. And it is even more curious that Bob returned home in the most unexpected way. Bob, now more than fearful, seems determined not to move until the bus arrives. However, all that determination is blurred thanks to hunger, so he heads to a dispenser machine to buy some chocolate. It doesn't work. But the truth is, the moment in which Bob Sponge is in front of the food machine and hopes that the chocolate falls, it generated a feeling of anguish and anxiety that he would lose the bus, since I imagined the hunger and fear I felt at that moment, Bob, and that made me empathize deeply with him. And I say, also, that he would end up losing the bus over and over again. For me, this scene, in addition to representing a comic relief, I also interpret it in a way in which the bus, an object that represents an easy, logical, and simple exit to return to his comfort zone, tells him that he is not yet ready to leave the void, that he still cannot return home without having faced his fear of darkness and the unknown. Angry, Bob heads to the bus station. Now his attitude seems more hostile than fearful. It is noticeable that there was a change in the way he is facing this problem. It seems that now he has already reached the end of the bus, but he is still afraid of the bus. It seems that now he is no longer afraid of the inhabitants of the abyss, since when he arrives at the line, he sets himself determined and says he is number 1 in the line undeniably, which is a great advance of Bob when it comes to overcoming fear. However, despite his attitude, he is relegated to the end of the line, since the fact that he is angry does not give him the right not to respect the rules. Bob, angry and a little intimidated, remains in the line. However, when he notices his attitude, one of the inhabitants of the void leaves an egg on his head, which when opened, relegates him even more from the line. Frustrated and angry, he explodes and makes a ruckus since he seems to be doing everything wrong. Once calmer, he decides to make the line like everyone else, where another obstacle is found, which is the accent. After explaining that he needs to know when the next bus is going to leave and decipher the accent of the inhabitants of the abyss, they sadly indicate that he has lost the bus again and the opportunity to return home. Bob, more angry than ever, demands that he be given a bus, which is ignored, for which a few moments later, the local turns off his lights. Quietly, he takes out his flashlight, but as if it were a bad move, the flashlight makes a short and goes out of the blue. Bob, alarmed, realizes that this is no longer normal darkness. It is a deep darkness. Alarmed after hearing a noise in the station, he decides to go out walking, to then run and then try to fly. At that moment, Bob collides with a wall of blows. Nervous, he begins to throw warnings at his stalker, who at that moment, and with his nerves on the edge, meets the first inhabitant of the abyss who asks for help. I would like us to analyze this scene. When he meets the inhabitant of the abyss again, he gives the globe to Bob. Remember that this globe is a representation of the link between Bob's safety and home. Likewise, as by magic, also the inhabitant of the abyss illuminates Bob's panorama, this in a literal and metaphorical way. The light in the abyss represents the hope of getting out of it, from that dark and unusual place, and it is even more curious how the abyss itself takes out Bob Sponge, representing that fear of the unknown and what inhabits within him was within Bob's mind, demonstrating that everything in that place is not so bad, that not all the inhabitants of the abyss are bad people, and finding that, even in the darkest moments, we can always find the light of hope, which will lead to us home. In the end, Bob returned home, said goodbye to his friend in the accent that he learned at the place, and his friend answers with a simple, "Of noth W tells you," demonstrating that in the end, they were not so different to Bob, so that in the end, Bob would return home in good health and safety on a pleasant glissando. Remember to leave your like and subscribe to support the video, and follow me on Instagram. I upload very interesting content. Thank you very much for coming this far, and if you want me to make a video on a similar topic, let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and if you liked the video, I would love to see you in the next one.